Rose Broom, who is CEO and co-founder of Hand Up, who's moderating the panel tonight, and she's going to dive right in and get started with these wonderful speakers. So thank you.
Thank you, Megan, and everyone for coming here tonight. So I'm going to ask that everybody starts out by just saying your name and the quick 1 or 2 sentence description of what you're working on before we dive into questions.
Hi, I'm Doniece Sandoval. I'm the founder of Lava Mae, which is a mobile hygiene service for the homeless, which we provide to reconnect people with their dignity, because we believe that with dignity comes opportunity.
Hi there, I'm Bree Giammarino. I'm the co-head of IndieGoGo Life. IndieGoGo, you may have heard of, is a company that was founded out of the Bay Area in 2008 to enable anybody to achieve the change they want to see in the world by raising funds and support from their community. In December of 2014, we launched IndieGoGo Life as a dedicated platform, a sister site, particularly dedicated for people who want to raise funds for themselves or those they love. So we see thousands of fundraisers that have raised millions of dollars for people around the world. A lot of these are in community projects and in medical projects, so people covering the cost of medical care, housing, education, these sorts of personal causes.
Mark Roth, the founder of The Learning Shelter. The Learning Shelter is a 90-day program meant to take people and transition them from living in homeless shelters to being part of the maker community, learning digital fabrication and advanced manufacturing skills like 3D printing, laser cutting, and 2D digital and 3D digital necessary to make those things possible.
Awesome. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about crowdfunding. And as many of you know, Hand Up is a crowdfunding site for homeless people and others in need. And IndieGoGo is a crowdfunding site. But we're actually going to talk about using crowdfunding to fund your initiative. So this one is for Doniece and Mark. Why did you use crowdfunding to fund your social initiative? And did you have any challenges with other sources initially?
So when we launched our first IndieGoGo campaign, which was 2 years ago in September, we had not done any fundraising. It was basically our splash into the world. And we thought about it very carefully. I say we, it was me, I was pretty much by myself. But the thinking was that if we could do this right, we would have the chance to create grassroots support for this service, and we felt like we could show that everyday people, both in our community and around the globe, believed in what we were doing. Then we could take that message to larger funders, to local government, to foundations, and prove to them that this was something worth doing, and that is exactly what happened for us.
I had actually, through the SF Homeless Meetup, met Doniece, and she told me how easy it was to do. Basically, we didn't have any challenges with other funding sources because crowdfunding was the first thing that we turned to. Being a member at Tech Shop, that's kind of how I reinvented myself. So I was surrounded by successful Kickstarter campaigns. IndieGoGo was an active presence in the neighborhood and seemed like the right platform for our campaign to run on. The reason why I meant so much to use crowdfunding is we needed to tell the world the secret story of normal people living in homeless shelters rather than the stereotypical story of what people are like. It's meant to be a trickle-down system, so that you help somebody, they help somebody, they help somebody else, so that we can make a big impact on the greater problem. But IndieGoGo was the first place that we started any type of fundraising.
And Mark, can you tell us a little more about what was your campaign for? What was your goal?
So our campaign goal was $60,000. It was intent to take 4 people that were currently living in homeless shelters and give them 90 days worth of housing, as well as 90 days worth of training. Ultimately, long range for us to scale, we need to build our own maker spaces and we need to make those dedicated to people in the homeless community. But in order to prototype it and get through some of the hard challenges and figure out what's right, what's wrong, and what moves us forward, we prototyped it inside of Tech Shop. So the original fundraising, we did fall 2/3 short on our goal. Luckily, the mayor of San Francisco has this awesome thing called the Office of Civic Innovation, and we were able to buoy our money and actually more than double it through the city's help. But we raised $20,000 plus $25,000. We used that to buy 5 tech shop memberships, 15 classes per person, hire full-time people, and buy all the supplies so that people could actually come in and start fabricating things. And one of the really important things for us was the fact that the people that were participating were going to be making the rewards. So you didn't just come on and donate money. You came on and you bought a t-shirt or a bracelet or a little gadget that was, laser cut that could be assembled into a, locust or something like that. Really cool little things, but the whole thing about it was that the people that you were supporting were actually going to come in and fabricate the goods that you were going to get as rewards, so you knew you actually had, hands-on experience being taught in the shelter. So that's basically what the fundraising was for. That's what they did. The 5 people that graduated have had various levels of amazing success, and we're getting ready to do it again.
That's awesome. So the campaign was not only for the funds, but also connecting people with actual tasks of what to make and marketing help as well.
Right. And like maybe a third of it went to costs, a third of it went to manpower to make the thing possible. And then we actually did end up with a little bit left over that we're using to start the next one, even though we don't have funding yet. We're now looking towards more traditional forms of fundraising, and we're hoping that by July of 2016, we'll actually be able to build a self-sustaining model similar to what they got at Doniece Street, where we support ourselves.
And Doniece, can you share a little bit about what your goal was, what were you fundraising for, and what other side benefits besides the funds did your campaign bring?
Right, so we had also something very tangible. We had a bus. We got these buses from Uni. They were retired and decommissioned and being replaced by hybrid buses. And I was telling Rose and Bree earlier that my background's marketing, branding, and PR. And so when I got the idea for Lava Mae, I knew I could take one of 2 paths. I could either buy a commercial shower truck, or I could take something that people love to hate, a Uni bus, and do something totally novel and innovative with it. And of course, that's what won out. So we wanted to raise, we knew that people could wrap their mind, especially if we could do a little cool graphics on the side and talk about the issue. Lava Mae was started because I found out about the massive shortage of showers and toilets available to the homeless. There are 16 showers that are available to the 3,500 plus people in this city, which is astounding when you think about the wealth that's here. And so this is a story that we basically told, was what the absolute need was, what the possibility of hygiene could bring, that dignity was incredibly important to that. The part about opportunity came a little bit later when people started asking me about what my theory of change was, which I didn't know what a theory of change was to begin with, but it ended up there. But fundraising for something that was really sort of different and unusual gave us a very interesting story. And so one of the side benefits of that was all of the press that we managed to secure around the globe, which is exactly my bailiwick. But it also brought people to us from as far away as Ghana and Mongolia and as close as San Jose and Sonoma, who said, hey, we love what you're doing, our community has a huge need, and how can you and we partner to sort of bring this service? So that's basically in the next phase of Lava Mae. But the platform was really robust. I mean, being able to tell stories and to make it very visual, and then I have to say the IndieGoGo team, we turned to Bree a lot, was amazing and hugely supportive, and that made a big difference for us because, like I said, it was pretty much a team of 1 with a few friends who helped out with some social media, so very important. And another additive with that was our goal was $75,000, which was what it takes to retrofit a bus, and we raised, I think, $57,000 the first time. But there was so much press that we had a private donor step up, and once we closed the campaign and just came in and closed the funding for us. So I think what you see in both Mark and my situations is that even if for some reason you don't hit a goal, there are other opportunities that crowdfunding can open up for you, which can be pretty powerful as well.
Awesome. That's cool to hear about all the other opportunities it brings. We see that with Hand Up members as well, that sometimes the donors are able to offer support, but also connections to them. And Bree, so you see kind of a broader group. on IndieGoGo, what types of campaigns are you seeing succeed, especially on IndieGoGo Life?
We do see a broad range, but we have definitely looked across all of the fundraisers and campaigns to see what are commonalities for those that are successful. And I must say that again and again, the number one aspect that comes up is sharing your personal story. And actually, it's a twofold personal story. It's the personal story of who you are, who's running the fundraiser, so for Mark or Doniece, and why you are running it. So what makes you care enough to do what you're doing? Why are you passionate? Or why are you going to stick through this? A lot of times the projects that people are doing are really hard. Like either of these two folks could have given up when they didn't hit their goal, or they could have given up when they faced a challenge, but they moved through. And our donors really like to see that the people who are running fundraisers are passionate. So showing that personal story of passion is so, so important. And then the second piece is the personal aspect of the impact you're having. Why is what you're doing important? Why should the rest of the world care? What is it that connects the impact you're having to everybody else? And that can be geographic. It can be that people are in the same city as the impact that you're having. It could be that the folks who you're working with are veterans and you are a veteran yourself or have them in your family. It could be any number of points of connection. I see a lot of fundraisers that connect with people based on university affiliations. There have been a lot of women at Wellesley lately, actually, who have run fundraisers for various purposes, and it's been truly inspiring to see the Wellesley alumni and current student community from people who have never met, but because they have this point of affiliation, come together to help each other. So it's really that personal story on the impact and on the fundraiser side that's so important.
So on the site, people can leave you messages, and that was one of the things that was incredibly powerful for us. I heard from several people who had actually been homeless in San Francisco. A lot of homeless people are only temporarily homeless, but one of the things they said over and over again was that finding a shower was the most challenging thing for them as they were trying to interview for jobs. But just that it's this opportunity to hear from the people who are responding to your campaign. It's kind of an opportunity to validate what you're doing, to even get insights that you may not have gleaned. So it's a very powerful tool that, I think if you launch a crowdfunding campaign, you should pay special attention to. When people leave you messages, and you'll get all kinds of messages, but when people leave you valuable messages, don't let them go untended. Really cultivate those and maximize the value that they potentially could have.
Awesome, good tip there. Bree, you said something that I wanted to drill into about the Wesley students. Do you see, so a student posts a campaign to help with some education expenses. Where do you see the majority of their donors coming from?
We tend to find that it's important to rally your very close community at first, and especially on IndieGoGo Life, where we've dropped all IndieGoGo fees for that, partly because of this purpose, that you're rallying your existing community, especially in the early pieces of your fundraiser. And this is going back to the idea of trust, because the person who contributes to you first really needs to believe in you in order to put their money behind you. We sometimes joke, if your mom or your sister won't give you $5, why should a stranger do it? So getting that early community to show their social proof point that they believe in you is a signal to the greater world. So once you've hit that initial momentum, which differs from fundraiser to fundraiser, but we say at least 30% should come from your closest community, and that means actually you should set a goal accordingly, where you know your closest community can help you get to 30%, and maybe that's a lower goal than you initially want, but you can always raise more than your goal, and the value of having that initial momentum is really quite high because it sends that positive signal to the world. We find from there two things happen. One is that secondary networks start to kick in, especially on IndieGoGo Life, where it's so much about person-to-person connections that Facebook and social networks are our #1 source of traffic on IndieGoGo Life. So Facebook messages start to pop up, and people who are Wellesley alums see that other people who are Wellesley alums have posted the campaign, and they'll go and check it out. So those secondary networks kick in. And then the third piece is when strangers start to kick in, or friends of friends of friends, who are those final networks in the IndieGoGo community as well. We use what we call the GoGo factor to take into account how much momentum your fundraiser is having, and the more momentum it has, not by virtue of dollars raised, but rather by engagement, the more we promote it to our community. via our newsletter, social media, and homepage. So all of those routes are very helpful. Perhaps my favorite example of this is the recent Humans of New York fundraiser on IndieGoGo Life, which was just very exciting. It was a blogger from New York who met a child on the street in Vidal and asked him, who is the person who inspires you most? And he said, my principal. And now Brandon is used to asking people questions. He has 12 million followers on Facebook who see him ask these questions. But he rarely hears somebody talk about an influencer at their school. So he went and met this principal. Together, they came up with an idea of sending the kids from the school to Harvard to experience what it felt like to belong in one of the most exclusive universities in the world. And when Brandon posted his fundraiser with a following of 12 million, it was quite easy for him to hit his initial goal of $100,000, which he did so in less than 2 hours. But from there, the ripple effect was extraordinary. And ultimately, this fundraiser got momentum across lots of different networks, not just Harvard folks, not just people who follow him, but he ended up on Ellen and Good Morning America and eventually the White House, where he brought Vidal, and they had this great meeting with Obama. But ended up raising more than $1.4 million from more than 50,000 donors, which is truly extraordinary.
Wow, that's amazing. And it's cool to hear that story and to hear some of your great tips about how to have a good campaign. What are a couple big mistakes that you see in terms of I don't want to say the worst campaigns, but campaigns where you're like, oh god, they just made a big mistake.
I did it again. Well, it goes back to that being personal, and it's not just about sharing your personal story, but it's about being personal to your online audience. So sometimes what I'll see is a nonprofit that will take a video they've maybe used at a gala, and they'll just throw it up on the campaign page and expect the world to come. But if you're not tailoring the experience to be specific for the point in time and it's specific for the project that you're working on, then that online community doesn't resonate with you and they don't feel the passion there, that they're part of something. I think a big part of crowdfunding is that people want to be part of something bigger than themselves. The campaigns and fundraisers are an opportunity for them to be engaged. Maybe they don't have their own time to start a nonprofit, but they so very much want to apply what they can to help the nonprofit leaders who are doing that. So really making the experience tailored for them and making them feel involved is very, very powerful and something that can be the game changer for your campaign. Maybe these guys have examples of what they would have done differently.
Yeah. This is good, specific and personal. Yeah, I mean, if you guys want to chime in with anything that you would do differently, I actually was going to ask the next question of what are any challenges that you had, so mistakes you made or challenges that you faced by using crowdfunding. I mean, crowdfunding sounds so amazing when we hear this, but certainly there are some challenges associated with it too. Go for it, Ryan.
I would actually say start by looking at what you're trying to accomplish and seeing who's come before you and what can you replicate. I made a fatal mistake of starting from a product standpoint. My first ever crowdfunding campaign was while I was still living in a homeless shelter. It was called Cozy Lab on Kickstarter. It raised $217 on a $15,000 goal. So in order to get my act straight, I joined a mastermind group and helped people raise $110,000 for an open underwater robotic operated vehicle, almost $500,000 for a folding kayak that you can put in the trunk of your car or carry on board with you. And with about $1 million worth of successful crowdfunding chops under my belt, I went into the nonprofit space and fell 2/3 short on a $60,000 goal. And then after my campaign launched, and after I thought that I had pulled all the right triggers and everything was in the right place, is when I started looking at other nonprofit campaigns. I basically went on IndieGoGo, I typed in homeless, and I found out that, Doniece was only one of the few people that even came close to her goal. It's a very different space, so get to understand what you're trying to accomplish. And even though my story was completely genuine and it built a lot of trust and it was totally valid, it was still a very hard uphill battle because I had started by trying to fix the wrong problem.
And have people really see who you are, and that needs to come through not only in your video, as Bree says, it really is about a point in time and what it is you're trying to fund, but it's also that as you're writing the narrative, some people like these really long narratives. And when you get an email and you see that it's paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs, you just stop reading after a while because you're too busy. So in PR, they teach you that you write in the inverted pyramid. So all of the most important information is up in the first paragraph, and then you just kind of distill down from there, and if you keep people, great. But keep it simple. Keep it as simple as you can. And just be ready for the long haul. You get obsessive. Like, you go and you check constantly. Did I get another donation? You know, and you're calling people, I haven't seen your donation come in yet. Where is it? So you get a little obsessive. Just be ready for that.
One thing that I would add that I would do in retrospect and didn't have really the comfort level of doing is I would have liked to have found the participants first and said, these are the 5 people that you're actually going to be supporting, and this is what they're actually going to make in return for your donation. This is what your reward will be. Because we were dealing with such a vulnerable population, we honestly didn't want to take anybody and say, in 45 days we're going to put you into a program, because they needed something right now, and if it came along, we didn't want them to stop and wait for the learning shelter. So if it's possible and you're getting ready to run a crowdfunding campaign, you know, just like you put together a business plan, put together the actual results first, and then the only thing you need left is the fuel. You've got the engine in the vehicle, you just need the fuel. You'd be a lot further ahead.
Okay, so plan ahead and keep it simple. Okay, next question here. So as you all know, homelessness and poverty are very broad, complex topics that are not always well understood by the public and even by the people working in social services as well. How have you seen this play a role in how people responded to your campaigns? Did you get a lot of questions, or were there any misunderstandings?
I mean, of course, there's the people that are like, well, isn't everybody who's homeless mentally ill or addicted to some sort of, you know, chemical substance? But by and large, it was really supportive, and I had myself as the prototype, and I had some pretty good press that supported the idea that, you know, that I was helping more people like me, and that part of the problem and part of the reason why we had a campaign in the first place was that there was these invisible people that you didn't know were in shelters, and they looked like normal people, and it was really hard for them to find resources because they weren't as desperate and quote-unquote needy as you needed them to be.
So Lava Mae was and continues to be in sort of an interesting position, I think, because we leverage design to do something innovative, like, you know, showers and toilets on a minibus. But also that it's something so basic that even people who don't support services for the homeless are, you know, get the fact that if you cannot get cleaned up, that if you go for a period of time, you start to disconnect from yourself. So if you've ever been sick, if you've ever been camping, or whatever it is, for a period of time, that first shower you take is transformational. You have a terrible day, and you take a shower, and you feel like yourself again. So I would say 99% of the people who hear about Lava Mae or engage with us about Lava Mae completely get it. They either love it because it's this cool designy thing, or they just get the value of being clean. So we very, very seldom encounter people who push back at us and say, this is a service for the homeless, you're for the homeless, all of that. At the same time, though, we try and leverage the opportunity to tell a story. I mean, Rose is always saying that homeless equals human. And this is one of the things that, you know, especially in this city with the circumstances we live in, the people who are homeless are not the people who readily come to mind. We serve a lot of people who are employed, but they can't afford shelter, so they're living in their cars, including a couple of tech guys that we have seen come by. So we feel that while those questions and those issues and those challenges don't really get directed at us, we can step into the fray because it's something that we want to be a part of addressing and shifting perceptions.
I'll validate that too. When I was living in my car, the hardest thing to get was a shower.
Thank you guys. So this one's for free, and let's see. So we're seeing growing trends around crowdfunding. We have crowdfunding for medical care. We have crowdfunding for, you know, all kinds of hardware projects and creative projects and schools and small business loans and you know, so many new crowdfunding sites every day. I mean, like literally we have a Slack channel where we just post new sites that are doing crowdfunding for people living in poverty. There are so many. Do you see any challenges around this or any potential issues for the future? How do you think this is going to kind of shake out?
I think
that we're still at the tip of the iceberg for crowdfunding, actually, and that we're going to see it continue to grow and grow. There are a few reasons that I think that. One is that we're almost going back further in time. If you think about our communities before the internet and even before modern civilization, you would see villages come together to help each other all the time. Let's say that there was somebody who moved into your village. You would all come together to help that person get the startup resources they need to be on their feet in your village, and that was just what you did. And then you knew that if you ever moved to a new village, they would help you in the same way. It's almost like this reciprocal giving model that has been around for many years, and I feel like crowdfunding is actually helping us to come back to that and be a more community form of almost insurance, where you know that you're helping somebody right now, but that in the future, if you ever need help, they will help you as well. So if anything, I think we're going to see it happen more and more, and people moving towards this more direct form of support, rather than using some of the institutions that exist in our society today, like traditional insurance systems.
Interesting, and it's interesting to think about, similarly, charitable giving, and how charitable giving is over $200 billion in the US, $35 billion for human services, and what we're seeing that new generations are saying, hey, we want more transparent, direct ways to give. We want to see what the impact of giving is, and this is a perfect kind of opportunity for crowdfunding where you know exactly where your money is going and how it's going to be used. Okay, did you guys have any comments on that one? Feel free to jump in. Okay, so this is for Doniece and Mark again. Do you see crowdfunding as part of any of your future initiatives? Any campaigns that we should know about, or other campaigns?
Never say never, but I honestly, I don't. For the Learning Shelter in future iterations, we're looking for large foundation support. Where I do see it coming into play is our participants. We definitely want to support them as they ideate products and services that can actually, launch businesses. We have one graduate of the 5 that we put through the prototype program who was creating an Etsy store online. So that's her way of, generating income and getting the word out. We are going to be like a parent Etsy store for that. But if any of them has a great idea, where I have tons of experience now in crowdfunding, especially my day-to-day company. We support crowdfunding campaigns all day. At least once a week, a new crowdfunding campaign comes in and says, we're making this part, we need a laser cut, can you help us with it? So I definitely see us sending our participants out into the crowdfunding world and supporting them in that way. And I also, kind of stepping back, one, I do have a comment, is that, the maker community is that ability to fabricate things and to get them to your neighbors in a much more village type way. And so I see that being the perpetual future. And as I promote my software company, which I'm not going to promote right now, but I tell people that, where we're at right now, the 3D printer is almost the Hayes 56K modem of the 1990s. We're on the cusp of something that's so massive and so huge that you can't even really begin to digest it. Because if it was 1995 and you were still saying that Jeff Bezos was crazy with Amazon, what would you say about a thing like Facebook? You couldn't even conceive it yet, but it still came. There's a lot more coming in the crowdfunding space, and there's a lot more coming in, peer-to-peer fabrication space that you're not even going to be able to imagine right now what it's going to look like.
Interesting. This makes me think about actually early stage nonprofits. And so, you mentioned now you've done your crowdfunding campaign, and now you're looking for bigger foundation funding. And something that I've thought a lot about is in the nonprofit world, it's hard to get early stage funding. Maybe it's hard to raise funding no matter what you're doing, but it's particularly hard for early stage nonprofit startups. And do you see a lot of nonprofits, or would you agree? Do you think it's fair to say that the new way for nonprofits to get off the ground is through crowdfunding?
It's a great way to prototype. I mean, when we launched our IndieGoGo campaign, we weren't saying that this $60,000 was going to create, the most amazing. The Learning Shelter was going to be the be-all, end-all of nonprofits. We were like, we have a great idea. We have some people, a team around it. We want enough seed money to test this and find out if it works. So it was more of a proving ground for us. And I highly, highly recommend that you use it that way. But to scale, you're probably going to be just like, you'd go MVP. You test your product, you get some friends and family, you try to get an angel round, you wouldn't keep going back to angels, you'd try to get a VC. It's the same for crowdfunding, it's up to nonprofit status.
Rudy, do you have any insights on this, having a foundation background?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. One of the things that has been interesting in working with nonprofits, and there's a very neat fundraiser up right now for SE Social Justice Group, which is a new nonprofit working with women with incarcerated loved ones. And they haven't had a lot of major foundation gifts yet, but have a fundraiser up right now, is that they're able to take advantage and make the most of people who are ready to donate not just their time and their talent and treasure, which we've always talked about in philanthropy is what you can donate, but also networks. So for this first fundraiser that Gina, the founder of this nonprofit, is doing, it's actually started by a San Francisco blogger named Souls of Society, Dijon Bowles, who works similarly to that blogger in New York I mentioned, in that he meets people in San Francisco and shares their stories. When he met Gina, he was so moved by her story that he wanted to start this fundraiser for her, and he's rallying the 100,000 people who follow his Facebook feed in the Bay Area to also support her work. So I think it's a neat chance that at the beginning stages of most nonprofits, it's actually the person who's the make or break for whether you're going to move forward, because it goes back to that passion and stick-to-itiveness that is going to make that nonprofit move forward, because most nonprofits will have tons of places where they have challenges in the early days, but it's only the person who cares the most and has a learning mindset who's going to move it forward. And crowdfunding, as I said, is all about the person. So it gives the chance for us to come and support the people and move forward their ideas, give them that credibility that then enables them to get additional grants and tap into existing systems down the line.
Thanks for sharing that story. So Bree has kind of already given us some of her visions of the future of crowdfunding, that we're going to see even more of it. And I'll ask if you can put your futurist hats on and think about, are there any ways that you think crowdfunding is going to evolve, that not just in its adoption, but in terms of how we're using it? Any ideas on things we might see there, or things you would personally like to see evolving within crowdfunding? I mean, whoever wants to take a stab.
There's going to be other platforms, but one of the things that I always question, and I would absolutely turn this into a question for you, Rose, is when you think, I'm going to create my own new crowdfunding platform, do you think of using another one first versus starting your own thing? I mean, the first thing that I would want to know if I was asking somebody, why are you starting your own crowdfunding campaign or platform instead of just running campaigns on IndieGoGo or Kickstarter? What's the motivation to start something new when there's already something there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's funny how he turns it around. So one thing about HandUp that's not always very obvious from our site as well, the front end of our site is a crowdfunding site. I don't need that anymore. With member stories and donate buttons, similar to other crowdfunding sites, the back end of our site is completely unique. And so the back end of our site looks like kind of accounting or project management software that our nonprofits interface with. So for HandUp, we have donors come to our front end, but case managers at nonprofits use our back end to sign their clients up, to keep track of how much money their different clients have, to do redemptions, and to use for their reporting, both for their accounting and for different metrics that the organization might need. So that was something that we did have to custom build, although we definitely have thought about how we can use other sites on the front end.
So I don't really see any solutions that aren't solved by the existing platforms, but I'm sure some of you do and you're already working on it. So yeah, I don't really know what the next phase or types of crowdfunding campaigns or services are going to look like, because I don't have a problem that's not being solved.
Unless you guys have something to add, we can open up to questions.
How do you guys handle follow-up with your funders afterwards?
That's very important.
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget that they participated in some campaigns, especially if you're doing a lot of Kickstarter stuff. Like, I've forgotten products that I've supported, and suddenly I get something in the mail. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this. what I do is I try and set up a time frame. First of all, I try and create the perks that are really manageable. If you'll go to any of our campaigns, you'll see that there's not a lot of stuff that we're actually producing, because that takes up a lot of time and it eats up a lot of your profit if you're then having to sort of ship that out. So with the easiest things, we hit them within the first month of the campaign closing. So like the top 5 perks are all sort of closed in the top, the first month after the campaign. And then we migrate all the information that we get from IndieGoGo into our Salesforce accounts. And we follow up with hey, you supported us on IndieGoGo, do you want to continue to follow us, so that people have a chance to opt out? And I would say probably 80% of the people, continued on with us, and then we have a sort of a very infrequent newsletter that goes out when we have really important news or events. But definitely maintaining that conversation and inviting and trying to make it not a one-way conversation, but to have people have opportunity to talk back to you with ideas or thoughts or recommendations or opinions or whatever. It's really important to keep it dynamic.
I'm kind of bad at this part. Half of my updates to the IndieGoGo campaign are me soliciting for other people's campaigns, because I already know that these people are sympathetic to the homeless needs. But we do have on our website a page where you can actually just type in your email address and join a campaign, or join a mailing list rather. And so eventually we're going to activate that and break it off into, why did you sign up for the mailing list? But so far, I'm also kind of bad at social media, so we've been lackluster on that. And after we succeeded, it was kind of like, oh crap, now what do we do? So we hired an executive director. We've made some follow-up videos. And so we still get the occasional press. We've got a small documentary coming out on us. But follow-up, is really, really important, and it's something that we've, halfway carried the ball downfield on.
Any other questions? What's a theory of change?
God, I'm not the only person. Right, so we started out just the fact that we wanted to connect people to their dignity, right? That was something that is just a sort of very simple thing. It doesn't have a next step. A theory to change is a large vision. How is it that what you do, it's like that pebble in the pond. So what we ended up with, for example, is that hygiene reconnects people with their humanity. And until that happens, because it's easy to lose when you've been living out on the street, until that happens and you don't have the wherewithal it takes to apply for a job or get housing or maintain health and well-being. So now the onus is on us to then track that next stage, right? So if someone's been with us for 6 months, and we've already seen this, they're getting jobs. We just saw this amazing guy who'd been with us for 6 months. He's now an engineer, a sound engineer with Dolby Labs, which is really cool, right? So from the streets to Dolby Labs. So tracking that and telling that story, and that is the vision, that hygiene is about more than dignity, that it is really about opportunity to get off the streets and completely transform your life. That's a theory of change.